Welcome, Washington, D.C. Metro, to Ryan Sloper's Real Estate Radio, the most important hour of radio every Monday on 1580 a.m., The Big Talker. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. For those of you who don't know or are not familiar, Real Estate Radio is a show dedicated to building the Washington, D.C. Metro's housing and credit markets one house at a time. Within every market, there are solutions, as well as tremendous opportunities. You just need some trusted advice. That's my message, and I will be delivering it to you guys every Monday from 2 to 3 p.m. right here on 1580 a.m., The Big Talker. Got a lot of great stuff lined up today. I wanted to dive into the Jackson Hole Ben Bernanke speech last Friday, which kind of gave a synopsis of where we're headed as far as what the Fed is going to do to try and stimulate or not stimulate the economy. Also, coming up in about 15 minutes, we're going to talk to you about why you should consider selling your house today. Selling sooner rather than later, and the implications of waiting 12 to 24 months. Coming up about 30 after the hour, we're going to discuss whether short sales are really becoming more of the norm and moving more. The banks are actually making the smarter decision and starting to pull away from actually foreclosing and allowing short sales. And also, we're going to jump into a lot of the negativity that's out there in the market and a lot of the anxiety that you consumers have that may be preventing you from moving forward on your real estate transactions. So we'll really dive deeper in that in the last segment of the show. But joining me on our panel first today is Louis Cammarosano, who is the general manager of HomeGain. Louis is often cited in the media as an industry expert in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, CNN Money, Fox Business, Smart Money, MSN, and numerous others. We're going to discuss to you what happened in the markets last week, as well as what's on deck this week that can affect you, your real estate decisions, your credit, anything financially that we feel is relevant to you in your real estate. Louis, are you there?
I'm here, Ryan. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, we've had a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, the weather has been the hot topic, at least here on the East Coast. It was interesting, Louis. Last week, I was sitting in my car, and my car just started shaking, and I was like, maybe my air conditioning or something's overheating because my engine, maybe it was just going out of whack. So all of a sudden, I turn around, and one of my buddies is in my car, and he's like, is somebody shaking your trunk? So I get out of my car, and sure enough, you see all these people running from the buildings. Of course, here on the East Coast, having an earthquake is kind of, it's crazy. We don't have those.
Of that magnitude, you don't, for sure.
No, and the crazy thing is, too, you guys, I'm sure, if you're in the D.C. metro area, we've been having aftershocks for the last week as well. Last night, my stepbrother said he's still feeling them, and he's probably, I don't know, maybe about an hour and a half away from it where it actually happened in Mineral Springs, Virginia. So we continue to feel those effects, and it's just kind of wild because we're just not used to it. And then right behind the earthquake was the good old Hurricane Irene, which obviously sent, ripple all the way up and down the East Coast. Everyone was trying to prepare for that. So it's been a very tumultuous past week for the East Coast, wouldn't you say?
How was I heard it died down a bit. Now, that's no consolation when the wind is 90 miles an hour, but it was supposed to be much stronger, wasn't it?
Yes. You know what? And I've heard a lot. The old FEMA director actually came out and said, I know that Bloomberg was trying to do his best to kind of, let everybody know that this is something that we had to take very serious, but he thought that really they should have informed everybody that wasn't even technically a hurricane by the time it got there. It was more of just a stronger tropical storm.
Right.
As time had went on, they were projecting it to hit different places, and it was kind of just becoming from class 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. So I think by the time it hit, the Northeast, it was really a class 1. It was just really sustained winds and more of a tropical storm. But the good thing is that, not too many people were hurt or injured. A lot of, people's homes and stuff, they've had minor damage, but not anything too extreme for what they were actually calling for. So, that is the one positive, that it wasn't a class 4, because that could have been, detrimental to a lot of people.
And also, you guys dodged a bullet on the earthquake. It was a fairly strong earthquake, but I didn't hear of much damage there either.
Where it actually hit is actually where I used to vacation when I was a kid. It's an area called Lake Anna, where there's a lake and there's a nuclear power plant and stuff over there. And luckily, it didn't do too much damage. But a lot of the homes that were around the surrounding area, they said that they did have the actual shift in, a lot of the foundations. A lot of the homes around there are pretty much done. Nobody has earthquake insurance. So, and just within that, that isolated area, I think it did the most damage. But out in the surrounding areas, not too much happened.
So that's a relatively sparsely populated area?
Yeah, well, it's more of like a vacation spot or a retire spot, you know what I mean? So it's more rural. It's definitely more rural for sure. So the surrounding areas, though, when you're DC Metro, we're probably about an hour and a half from there. So we felt it pretty good. It's one of those things that I guess, we never think anything about an earthquake, and then all of a sudden it's here.
Sure.
Now everybody is kind of panicked, like, oh, when is that going to happen again? So, and I'm just overall, it was kind of an experience for me. I know that. I mean, I thought my car was blowing up, and I step outside and it's an earthquake. But I'm sure, on the West Coast, have you experienced many out there on the West Coast?
Just in the 4 range.
Yeah.
I've been out here 6-7 years, but we've had them, as you know, much bigger.
Yeah, well, I'm just happy that nobody was really injured and everything kind of worked itself out, and hopefully there's not too many more aftershocks after the fact.
Your first reaction is like this indignation, like who did that? What's going on?
Yeah, that was the first thing I thought. I was kind of like,
You kind of get annoyed, like who's messing with my ground here?
Well, the honest thing, honestly, my first thing was I thought we got bombed. That was my first reaction because I was like, what in the world? We don't have earthquakes here. So I'm thinking, you're close into D.C., and I'm sure a lot of you out there were driving around in your cars or in a building and running for the door jamb to get under the door jamb to make sure that nothing happened. I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, it creates chaos. Lewis, I'm telling you, the everybody around here, from the government to just people, were worried about, okay, what do we do next? The roads basically shut down, like all the interstates. People were driving like maniacs all over the place. So it really created mayhem. I mean, it was nuts. And I guess it's one of those things, like something that you always talk about. Oh, I wonder what that's like. And then once it gets here, it's like you're scrambling, trying to get your bearings and figure out what to do next. Not to mention that pretty much all the cell phones that basically went down because there were so many people dialing at the same time that none of the phone calls could go through. So, I mean, talk about mass hysteria. That's exactly what was going on last week.
You had emergency preparedness week there in the D.C. area.
Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, it was definitely interesting times. I mean, it's definitely one for the history books, that's for sure. I know next time I'll be a little bit more prepared next time I start to feel my car shake and or my equilibrium on my body start to come off. I mean, it's just a different experience altogether.
The chances are you'll probably have another hurricane before you have another earthquake, though.
More than likely. Let's hope it's neither. Let's hope that it's neither.
Exactly.
Jumping into last week, I mean, a big thing that was on deck, Lewis, and we've been talking about this for a week, is what's going on with the Fed. We thought that it was going to be, well, at least the markets were anticipating that was going to be a big mover, his speech, but really there wasn't much in it that we didn't already know or that we didn't think that they were going to, come out and say that this is the plans we have to stimulate the economy. We know that they have QE3 in their back pocket, but, one of the things that I've been thinking about, and it's really started bothering me, one of the comments that Bernanke made was, and I quote, "Notably, the housing sector has been a significant driver of recovery from most recessions in the United States since World War II. But this time, with an overhang of distressed and foreclosed properties, tight credit conditions for builders and potential borrowers and lenders absolutely and basically have led to continued house price declines. The rate of new home construction has remained at less than 1/3 of its pre-crisis level." Now, he basically has said and acknowledged what the problem is and why we can't get this economy going back again. So wouldn't you think that he would take his own words and create a plan where he could free up this tight credit and loosen it up? Because that's the one thing that it's going to take in order to really get things moving again.
Well, I don't know if he has that power. I mean, he sets the monetary policy, but he doesn't set the lending standards.
Well, here's the thing, though. What the Fed's job actually reads is, according to official Federal Reserve documentation, it's to conduct the nation's monetary policy, supervise and regulate banking institutions, maintain the stability of the financial system, and provide financial services to depository institutions. So to me, it would seem as he is dropping the ball a bit because they should be able to do that. I mean, they can do everything else, but, I mean, they can print as much money as possible. You would think that there would be some way to loosen up credit, whether they became the lender of last resort or whatnot.
Well, do you hear also in his speech, and then also what the European central banks are saying, is they're kind of trying to step back and say that we've done as much as we can do, although they stand ready to do more, they're saying, but that they're putting they're trying to place the burden back onto the Congresses of the states to do some fiscal stimulus.
Yep.
They're really looking for a political solution as opposed to them just printing money. Now, of course, it ends up being the same thing because what they want, and Obama will come back from vacation and outline a plan which will involve spending on infrastructure and another stimulus package.
Yep. But ultimately, Lewis, I mean, we know that that's ultimately not going to help long term. And I mean, he said it himself. Since World War II, real estate has been the leader in bringing the economy back.
Well,
He's recognizing that.
they are, but what they're saying is, and I don't agree with it, is because we have long-term problems, we have to address those. However, we have a short-term problem, so we have to address that as well, and the two aren't mutually exclusive. So they're arguing for increased spending now and then cuts later.
Yeah.
The problem is we're so far extended that increased spending isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And really the solution to the housing problem is to let it go.
Right.
I mean, if you look what happened to Japan for 20 years, they kept trying to stimulate their economy. At some point, all you're doing is throwing good money after bad.
Yeah.
You really can't improve the housing market except by allowing the housing market to correct and find its level. Otherwise, you're doing these. If you remember the first-time homebuyer credit last year, that was a great little boost. It lasted as long as they had the credit in place.
Right.
And then the natural market takes its run, and it goes away, the demand for housing. And you really can't promote home building when you have this overhang of the foreclosures. Why would a home builder want to build more homes if he's going to price himself against the foreclosed homes and the short sales?
I agree there. You're listening to Real Estate Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Sloper, joined by Louis Cammarosano, the general manager of Home Game. We're discussing Bernanke and his speech last Friday at Jackson Hole. And, I guess, Louis, I mean, really, there's so many different things that are going on that it's really hard to nail down what can be done. Ultimately, I feel like, that Bernanke's pushing it back over to the politicians as well because the election's coming up. This is going to be one of the primary things that they're going to be running on. So instead of him making the decision, he's going to let the politicians make the decision in the upcoming election. So what we have going on is nothing's going to happen for another year.
That's probably true, but if you remember, Jackson Hole last year was not the place where they announced QE2.
Right.
They just mentioned as some of the things that they had available to them, and I think he kind of did the same thing now. And they did say in the speech that he's going to have a 2-day meeting this time in September.
Yep, it's the 20th and 21st.
Right. So then they'll discuss what stimulus they may or may not wish to do. And it's not like between now and then Congress is going to act with any fiscal stimulus.
Right. Yeah, you're right. And one of the things that he had said in there, just like you had mentioned, is that they do have other tools. In addition to refining our forward guidance, Federal Reserve has a range of tools that could be used to provide additional monetary stimulus. We discussed the relative merits and cost of such tools at our August meeting. We will continue to consider those and other pertinent issues, including, of course, economic and financial developments at our meeting in September. So it's just, they're going to continue to address this going forward. My opinion still is that, you said it too, until we can get through the glut of inventory, we're going to discuss this coming up in our next segment. Until you get rid of that, it's really hindering the rest of the home builders that are out there and markets in general because they can't build homes and sell homes at the going rate because of all the distressed ones.
Now, you're talking nationally, but I don't think that the situation is quite as you describe it in the D.C. metro area.
It's absolutely not, and I can't wait to kind of jump into the statistics to kind of show where we're at in the D.C. market. It's really a completely different dynamic here. I have a great story with one of my friends just this past weekend. We're discussing. He's like, I'm renting right now for $1,500, and granted, it's a friend. They were giving him a deal, but they were on a 30-year fixed mortgage. They were only charging him $1,500 for rent. Well, what do you think the landlord is? She refinanced to a 15-year fixed at like 3.625. Now her payment's around $1,900. They want to raise the rent from $1,500 to $1,950. Well, that is no longer a feasible option for my buddy. And I'm saying, well, basically she's making the decision for you. So you start looking at what other rentals are out there. He can't even find anything in that range for $1,950, closer into his job where he wanted to move. So I said, you need to consider buying because you can have a cheaper mortgage payment with the tax deductions and everything else. He's a self-employed borrower, so it made complete sense. And in this D.C. metro area, rents are rising at such a rapid pace that you really have to pay attention and make sure you're making the right decision for you and your family.
So, Ryan, would it make sense then? Let's say you're in the market right now, and HomeGain just is going to release our third quarter home prices survey. And if you are going to get a mortgage where your mortgage is lower than your rent payment, even if you think your home price may decline slightly, it might still make sense to purchase the home get the fixed long-term mortgage, pay less than you're paying in rent on your mortgage, even if the home price declines a bit.
100% yes, Lewis. And when we come back after the break, we will dive more into that. Stay tuned. Thank you for listening to Real Estate Radio.